Welcome everyone to our NCAA.com March Madness weekly look at the polls, my weekly honors, the Power 36, and some games to watch. I'm Andy Katz. So let's dive right in with my weekly honors for the week of November 26th. I went with Gonzaga as the team of the week. No surprise there after they won the Maui Invitational, knocking off Illinois, holding off the Illini, coming back to beat Arizona, and then a thrilling Maui Invitational final against Duke last Wednesday night. Remember, the Zags are playing without Killian Tilly, who's one of their best performers. He can shoot it, he can stretch, he's a rebounder, he's a little bit of everything for the Zags. He's out indefinitely after having his foot surgically repaired. But Rui Hachimura, Zach Norvell, Corey Crispert, Josh Perkins, Brandon Clark, Geno Crandall coming off the bench. They got a little bit of everything, and the Zags certainly deserve that title, and they're the #1 team in the country, both in my Power 36 and the AP poll. For my player of the week, well, I was at the Las Vegas Invitational, and I snuck away to go over to the T-Mobile Arena, not the tournament I was covering, just to catch Arizona State take on Utah State. And I saw Lou Dort, and he put up 33 points in the victory over Utah State. Impressive. He's a linebacker basically as a guard. He is just physical, power in the ball. He's very similar to Jordan Carolina Nevada, who I also watched this week in Las Vegas. Similar players. Dort's a better scorer. He is a freshman phenom for Arizona State. He is my National Player of the Week. A couple other shout-outs. I would say the most significant victory I saw this past week, not in person, but in terms of recognizing, I think it has to be Creighton's win over Clemson down in the Cayman Islands. The Big East desperately needed something positive, and Creighton got them going with knocking off Clemson on a neutral floor. Now later in the week, the Big East also won a title in New York and Brooklyn with St. John's, knocking off Cal and VCU, the latter game in overtime. And then on Sunday, you had a twofer. You had Villanova knocking off Florida State, a great win for the Wildcats after they really struggled at home, losing to Michigan and Furman. And then late on Sunday night, Seton Hall takes care of Miami. Huge, huge win for the Pirates and the Big East. Monumental. So those were some shout-outs, I would tell you, that are significant over the past week. You know, of course, other players of note, Antoine Davis, by the way, from Detroit, putting up 42 points, 33. I mean, guy's scoring phenomenally for his dad, Mike Davis, at Detroit Mercy. Remember, he signed to play, actually was going to go to Houston, committed, then was going to play at Texas Southern for his dad, and then dad gets the Detroit job late in the year, so he ends up going to play for his dad, and he's doing great things for Detroit. Kobe White at North Carolina, he put on a phenomenal performance in a loss to Texas, scoring over 30. He was significant in the win the next night as they came back and beat UCLA. Kerwin Roach had the great game when Texas knocked off North Carolina. Played well, for the most part, against Michigan State. You can't dismiss, clearly, as I mentioned, Rui Hachimura, Zach Norvell, all these guys had great weeks. But I would also single out, Josh Langford, who had 29 points, 29 all in the second half as Michigan State beats Texas. So that was significant, certainly for Michigan State, and a match and certainly a performance worth noting, as well as Shamari Pons, who ended up in that Legends title. He had a combined 67 points in those two wins for the Red Storm. One thing to be concerned about going forward is what's going to happen to Vanderbilt. Darius Garland is out with a meniscus tear. We'll see how that affects the Commodores going forward. Right now, Vandy a little bit reeling after losing to Kent State. Garland got hurt in that game. He's one of the best point guards in the country from the freshman class from Nashville, expected to take Vandy to the NCAA tournament. And a league that's struggling right now that needs some good news is the A-10. They're not gotten off to a great start. Davidson's still my pick to win it. I still think they can. St. Louis, which had the win over Seton Hall, ended up losing to Pitt. So A-10 still has some work to do here in December in the non-conference. All right, the polls. As I mentioned in the Power 36, I have the Zags #1, so does the AP. I have Kansas #2, so does the AP. Then we differ in Duke, Virginia. They have 3. Virginia, I have 3. They have Duke 3, Virginia 4. So we flip those. Then it's the same grouping of teams, essentially. Excuse me, with Nevada, Tennessee, Michigan, Michigan State, Auburn, all in those groupings. I had Michigan State, after what I saw in person, I had them up to number 6 in my poll based on the fact that they played really well in that comeback win in the second half against Texas. So that's why I bumped them up. Tennessee, if you remember, they lost in overtime to Kansas and New York, so that could have gone either way. I was very impressed with Nevada in person, even though the competition wasn't the same. Other significant teams sort of that moved up for me. I kept Buffalo, by the way, the same. North Carolina, right outside at 11. Ohio State keeps winning, so I've got them in the top 20 at number 16. Virginia Tech, remember last week they knocked off Purdue, so they held their ground. Wisconsin got to the final in the Bahamas, put them at 18. Iowa State and Maui still don't have Lindell Wigginton, and yet they went 2-1 and looked very good at it. Minnesota won in Vancouver, put them at number 20. So I'm a lot higher on these teams than the AP. Villanova crept back up into it for me at 23. Florida State slids back. Excuse me, 22. Florida State at 23. I've got Arkansas. That's my mea culpa. I didn't have them in last week after they knocked off Indiana. I've got them at 26 to get them in my Power 36. I dropped Nebraska because they didn't look good against Texas Tech, which, by the way, is a school that I jump all the way up from unranked to number 21. You can hear Chris Beard, by the way, on our March Madness 365 podcast. He will be on there, as well as Bobby Hurley from Arizona State. Want to plug them on the podcast. And Arizona State made it into my Power 36 at 31. Nowhere to be found in the AP. One thing I have an issue with the AP is you've got Mississippi State at 25, okay? Arizona State beat Mississippi State in Las Vegas. So that makes no sense. We do agree on Maryland. They're a little higher. They have them at 24. I put them at 36. I maybe should have had them higher. Maryland crushed Marshall. I saw Maryland in person. So I'm glad we both have them in our polls in some form. And Texas Tech, by the way, did make it into the AP poll at number 20. So there's a lot of agreement there with the polls. Now the net came out which is the new metric system for the NCAA. To say there was a debate on Monday about this is an understatement. Remember, this is dealing with a lot of new metrics: offensive, defensive efficiency, margin of victory, where the game was played, home, road. So teams that won away from home, like Loyola Marymount, which beats Georgetown on neutral court in Jamaica, that carries more weight. Are they the 10th best team in the country? No. Georgia Southern is ranked higher than Texas. Would anyone put them higher on a seed line? No. But these are numbers right now. Ohio State gets a lot of credit for winning at Cincinnati and at Creighton. That's why they were number 1. So take a deep breath, as I just did. And these are a snapshot in time of the poll. We can agree to disagree. I don't agree with all the rankings. Some I agree with, some I do not. I'd like to see, once there's more data over the next month, before I judge the overall net metric system. We're going to have another bracket, by the way, next midweek, our second one of the season. The first one was a preseason one. So this will be our first attempt to seed the 68 teams, basically with about a full 5 weeks of the season. So I think that'll give us a strong indication of where we are at this juncture. Games to watch this week. ACC Big Ten Challenge dominates it. Be very intrigued to see what happens with Nebraska, Clemson, and BC, Minnesota. Those games are on Monday night. BC hosting Minnesota, Nebraska at Clemson. I think Nebraska's got to win this game. Yes, they beat Seton Hall, but they looked awful against Texas Tech. They got to start winning consistent non-conference games. I think it's a big game for Minnesota too, as Richard Pitino said, because now it's a true road game after winning the tournament up in Vancouver. Michigan hosting North Carolina this week. North Carolina has a star in Kobe White. Nasir Little's going to get better, Michigan playing defense as well as they've played at this early stage in the season, I think, in a couple of years. So that'll be tough for North Carolina. Indiana at Duke. It's just going to be a bunch of stars for Indiana with Romeo Langford, Juwan Morgan, of course, Zion Williamson, R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish. But I got to believe that Duke is going to be cranking that up big time after what happened in Maui and the way in which they lost the Gonzaga game. You know, there are a couple others that I think, you know, that are of interest. That certainly, you know, Michigan State at Louisville. Louisville didn't get the results it needed in New York, losing both games. But Michigan State now needs to put consistent games together, and this one a true road game. So I think that's a critical game for them. Virginia Tech is at Penn State, and the Hokies beat Purdue. This game you should win maybe. But for Penn State, if you are who you are, you know, knock them off at home. Pitt's at Iowa. Iowa should win that game. No discussion. I know Pitt just beat St. Louis. Iowa should win that game. Should not be a question. Wisconsin, after their good showing in the Bahamas, they should beat NC State at home. That just should happen. No reason that it shouldn't. You know, Miami just lost at the end to Seton Hall at the Wooden Legacy in Fullerton. You beat Rutgers at home. That's what should happen if you want to be in the NCAA tournament. The Syracuse at Ohio State game, very intriguing. Syracuse lost its two sort of up games in New York to UConn and Oregon. Ohio State number one in the net, and looking great right now, 6-0. If you're Syracuse, you go in and win at Ohio State, that's going to carry a lot of weight. If you're Ohio State and you beat Syracuse, now you can't move up any higher than number one in the net, but you'll certainly move up in the rankings in the eyes of the selection committee if you knock off a team like Syracuse. So, as you can tell, there's a lot of intriguing matchups in the ACC Big Ten Challenge that I think you know, will have some repercussions going forward, really setting the table for the rest of December and into, you know, January. I know while we talk weekly, we're going to talk about Gonzaga. Gonzaga's got two monster games coming up. I mean, including the Washington. That's at home. I think they're going to win that. But they're playing Tennessee in Phoenix on December 8th. Following Saturday, they're at North Carolina. I'm just going to say this right now. If Gonzaga wins those two games and beats Washington as I expect, they may run the table. And they'll be number one for the rest of the season. Now, to beat Tennessee and North Carolina, that's a huge chore. Neutral Tennessee, at North Carolina, still don't have Killian Tilly. Not that he's, you know, Shaq here or anything like that, but still, big piece that they're counting on. And he's a difference maker. So, intriguing games to watch long-term for Gonzaga, certainly this week with the ACC Big Ten Challenge. And oh, by the way, later in the week, when we'll talk about this on all our platforms, the Big Ten season starts. So you don't want to go 0-2 because there's a little bit of a gap until it picks up in January. You can't get in that hole. You got to split these two games, and the Big Ten gives you one at home, one on the road. So it's imperative that you split them. You go 2-0, now you're leg up. You go 0-2, you're in a little bit of a deep hole. So I was out in Las Vegas last week for the Las Vegas Invitational. I had a chance to catch up with a couple of players and coaches and all that. So I'll give you a little taste of some of our interviews last week in Las Vegas. And what did this win tell you about this team?
Oh, we could beat and play anybody. You know, last year, you know, with the Duke game and the Nevada game, we just gave up leads like that. This year, we don't want to do that. We want to be in the NCAA tournament with going for a high seed, and we just want to beat teams that we know we can. So we just got out there and prove it.
What do you think you need to grow on over the next couple of weeks? You guys got at Michigan. You're going to play Gonzaga at home. You got to play Kentucky and Chicago. What did you learn about this team that you think will at least do well with these couple big games coming up?
With our leadership of the three seniors, we had adversity last night, and, you know, they brought us together and they kept us together. So as long as we keep following their lead, I think everything will be just fine.
All right, Josh, I talked to Tom Izzo as he was walking off, and he was hot at halftime. What did he tell you guys in the locker room?
That we had to pick it up. I think everybody knows how Coach is when he's upset, and you don't want to see him upset. But that's the beautiful part about him as a coach, and I think that's why I know that's why he's a Hall of Fame coach, because the way he coaches with passion and so much intensity that he can get the best out of his players. You know, he can make a player do something they never thought they were capable of doing it. And so, he came in halftime and he got into us. And so we came back, in the second half understanding that, we could win this game. I mean, the win was very achievable. We just had to cut down on the things that we were making mistakes on and go out there and play Spartan basketball.
And thanks for watching this week's edition of sort of Around College Basketball as we looked at the polls, my honors, and a little bit of the week ahead. As always, you can check out all our social media platforms on March Madness, on Twitter, Facebook, and of course on ncaa.com. That's where you can find all our content. We appreciate it. Thanks for listening now. Thanks for reading. And of course, thanks for visiting all of our sites. Happy hoops.